We are live.
And continuing, we're getting down to the point.
Whoa. Hold on. There we go. Okay. Little technical glitch right at the beginning. The Ochelli effect is live. That's why you hear stuff like that. Okay. It is March the 26th, 2015. Okay. So, look, the new intro, I'm happy with it. I wanted to make sure that Jefferson Morley wasn't a liar when he said I had a spooky kind of intro, so there you go. Anyway, tonight we're doing something that I've been wanting to do for a very long time. Okay? We all know, if you've listened to my show, that JFK is one of those areas of interest for me. The assassination, the intrigue that surrounded the situation, exactly what caused it, exactly what happened to our country as a result of November 22nd, 1963. Of course, that has to do with the adventures of going into the Vietnam War, etc., and all of the other divinations that did occur afterwards. And we can argue about that, and we can discuss it, and we can say that maybe Kennedy was the last actual president we had. We could say all those kinds of things. But here's what the problem is. Not only does the mainstream media and the apologists for the Warren Commission like to perpetrate their fictions upon us, but there are those who are more conspiracy-minded, who seem to be perpetrating all sorts of wonderful fairy tales on us. Now, this isn't an attack on any particular person or any particular set of people. This is an attack on the nonsense, the absolute garbage, which has been absolutely counterproductive to the work that, a fool like myself spends half of his lifetime sinking money, effort, time, energy, heartache, aggravation, and hell, that was just reading Bugliosi's book. And that laugh right there comes from a return guest, Carmine Sabastano.
Greetings. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Buongiorno.
Buongiorno, signore.
See, it's not all about the vowels, though, don't worry, because we also have a couple other people on with us tonight, and I'm really happy this is the first time they've been on, and that's Trish Fleming and Zach. You know what's funny about Zach is I actually don't know how to pronounce his last name. I've only ever read it, I've never said it, and I realized that when I was going to air. So, I'd like it if you guys introduced yourselves. Go ahead and unmute.
Hey, how you doing?
There's Trish. Trish Fleming. And...
Yes.
Where's Zach?
Hi, it's Zach. It's Gendro.
Gendro, thank you. See, I wasn't.
Yeah, just as it looks.
Well, it's a surprise because sometimes you look at somebody's name and it's not, the J is silent, the E is actually an A. You don't know, you know.
Hey, not a problem. Not a problem there. Nice to hear from you, Chuck. Good to be here.
Absolutely. See, this goes to show you that I don't script a damn thing on this show. I never do that because...
Good to keep it fresh.
Listen, I believe in the organic conversation. And I know it sounds like I'm in a jovial mood, but really, I am irritated beyond belief and have been dying to do this show. Okay?
Well, we're happy to be part of it, Chuck.
Oh, man. And I'm so glad that I have allies here to do this with, because otherwise, it's just Chuck screaming about, certain people.
Yeah.
and the nonsense that they push, and it's just, well, they disagree with Chuck, so therefore, no. They disagree with reality.
Yeah.
So, anyway, Carmine, I'd like you to go ahead and speak your mind about why it is we're doing this and everything. I know we're starting off a little slow, but I wanted to lay the groundwork so we make sense of this.
No, that sounds great. I actually would like to start with a definition of myth for everyone.
Perfect.
A myth is a traditional or legendary story concerning an event with or without determinable basis of fact or natural explanation.
Can't say it any better than that, and this is the area we're going to cover.
Yep. And people are free to disagree. We're not saying these are definitive. We are saying we've looked at a lot of evidence and none of these things stand up. So we believe that they are a waste of our time and our community's time. Now, people can pursue them as much as they like, but until they get some evidence, they don't mean anything.
Exactly. And I don't know, Zach or Trish, either one of you, if you want to add to what it is that is like the motive behind why you wanted to be involved in this show, speak for yourselves.
I'd like the divide in the research community to stop. I mean, there's so much left and right going on that at the end of the day, we're all just spinning our tires. No one's going to solve this by themselves. We need to work together. There has to be some sort of mutual understanding and mutual respect amongst the researchers. And it can't be lone nutter against conspiracy theorists anymore. It's more about solid research versus myth makers.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think that, go ahead, Carmine.
Oh, I'm sorry, Zach. No. I talk enough. You. I'll go after.
Well, I think that it's important. I have a historian background, and I think it's important. One of the main things I learned is that when you're first starting research, and as you continue down that path, is that you have to eliminate things that are, stumbling blocks, things that don't add up, because all it's doing is preventing you from getting to the truth. And that goes with any topic, but something that involves so much mystery and intrigue, you have to be especially careful and try to, I don't want to use the word garbage, but you have to toss out what isn't as useful as the other bits. You have to, or you're going to be sitting there forever spinning your wheels.
See, there you go. And I'll tell you something. I'm going to dedicate my portion of this little show to a very seldom heard name in the research community, which is Dr. Roger Remington. Okay? Because this is the guy who I have had many conversations with over the years who has kept me in check regarding a lot of this, about trying to rely on tangible things as opposed to the theoretical, as opposed to the fanciful. He's basically a Warren Commission deconstructionist for the most part, okay? But he's also a historian, retired professor from Aquinas College. I don't know if you guys have ever even heard of him. 4 books out on the assassination. The best known one is probably Biting the Elephant. Okay.
Well, that's why I like your show, Chuck. It'll help me find some new stuff. I'll look them up.
You definitely look him up. Self-published, and actually is working on his final book on the case. So a new volume will come out from him shortly. And believe it, when this guy says something, he backs it up not only with documentation, but with actual, attempting to and speaking to and going to the sources as best he can and things like that. Actual research.
A man after my own heart.
You got it. You got it. And I mean, and the guy doesn't make a statement without, having not one reference for it, but probably 4 for each statement.
Fancy that, facts. Who knew?
Facts that are verified and re-verified. Ah, strange world, isn't it?
I know. I don't understand why we even have to discuss this.
Oh, but unfortunately, it is because, especially in the electronic age, and see, this went on before the internet, okay? I know you guys might not realize this, but this kind of stuff was going on long before the internet, and I don't know where you want to start exactly. I know that Carmine and I kind of came up with a bullet point list of places to start with.
The worst.
We picked the worst stuff we could think of. Okay, and but here's the thing. I have had no discussion with Zach, and I've had no discussion with Trish. I'd like you guys to pick something. I guarantee you it's on this list.
Well, let's see. I mean, you could start with something, in my mind, I mean, the things like Badge Man and, the Umbrella Man and what he meant at the scene and things like that. I mean, where do you go with that? In the long term of it, there's no fact to really support any of that. And people kind of like to build their stories around this. All of a sudden, Badge Man went from a shadow to becoming the assassin. And I mean, that would seem to be somewhat mythological, I would think, based upon the fact there's no evidence of anything to back that up.
Please, take the pictures out first. I argue about those so much.
Okay, let's begin there. The first statement I want to make is that primarily the original mistakes made on this stuff were made in a time when the technology was not there to verify a lot of things. You would end up with blurs, you'd end up with reprints of things that created greater shadows, you'd end up with all sorts of interesting anomalies in photographs. Okay? And some people seized upon them because they were looking, they were digging, they were going through piles of, needles looking for the needle. All right? And I understand that.
Right.
But as we evolved, as we went from the 60s to the 70s and so on and so forth, I lost my taste for this kind of stuff. Because what happened is, every time, you went and did a scientific analysis to see if it was even physically feasibly possible for half of these things to exist, doesn't work.
Yep. They're guessing. They're doing their best guess off of, most of the time, a copy, or at best, something they took from a site that never had an original in the first place. That's like when you said, you have the Fox originals. Those are solid. Those are from a source that can be authenticated. They mean something. They're evidence. But when I hear people say, well, I have this picture and it proves 15 shots, I just want to kill myself. It's like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't prove any of that. You're just going on about nothing and wasting everyone's time.
See, I had that terrible experience on a show, which I'm not going to name here, but on a show with somebody who was discussing Doorway Man with me. For the listeners who don't know, there was an Associated Press photographer there, whose name is Altkins. Therefore, his photographs have been named thereafter the Altkins photographs. In Altkins 6, if memory serves me correctly, there is a portion of the photograph which is positioned just above the limousine on the print where the doorway of the school book depository can be seen. For many years, people argued that Oswald was in the doorway at the time of the shooting because the limousine is in such a position that there is no way, if Oswald was in that doorway, which seems logical, if Oswald was in the doorway, he could not have fired the shots from the 6th floor. That's fine and dandy. The problem is...
the evidence.
The evidence doesn't work.
None of it.
None of it. I mean, absolutely none of it. Now, I was on a show, and somebody was presenting me with an internet photograph taken from the John McAdams website. Okay, I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding.
You know what? There are. Let me say this for our friends on. Hopefully, will not long be the other side, and those who use evidence will join us. I think everybody has something to contribute, but people need to be more honest about the politics. There's a lot of politics in this that have absolutely nothing to do with the case, and Professor McAdams is one of the people who spins those politics. Now, I respect some of his work, but I do not respect the way that he plays around with people.
No, absolutely. And I would say the same thing. And as a matter of fact, he's probably one of the least nasty guys that I've had to deal with from that side. Now, that's a strange statement, right?
Well, they haven't met everyone you have.
Yeah, but he's probably one of the least nasty guys from that side. Okay, again, I don't want personal discussions, but meanwhile, this is a reproduction of a reproduction of a reproduction on McAdams' website. Okay, fine. I yank out of a folder while I'm sitting there talking to this individual on his radio show my copy of the one that I got from the Chicago Tribune archives. Okay?
So secondary source beats tertiary source.
That's what I thought. And I examine it under magnification and can't find the same anomalies that he sees. And then he corrects me about, I use the word distortion because he says, well, notice this here, this person's face is coming out of a wall. And I looked at it and I said, well, that's a distortion in the photograph. And then I was corrected by being told that distortions are only characterized as things like barrel distortion, pincushion distortion, and I'm like, no, if you understand optics at all, there is all sorts of distortions that can occur in the image. Okay? Pincushion and barrel distortion are two types of distortion. They are not exclusively the only types of distortion that can occur in a photograph.
Picked the wrong person to argue with, did he?
Well, I thought so, but again, I'm one of these guys who obviously just has this crazy agenda about looking at something as close to the primary source as possible,
I know, we're madmen, evidence. Who could think?
Well, anyway, the photographic evidence.
Well, it's.
Yeah, good. Go ahead, Zach.
Oh, sorry. This is Zach. It's really vital to understand. With my background, I worked with a lot of archives, and I tried to focus mostly on photographs. And it's really important that you have as close to the original source material as possible. And if possible, you could, do a high resolution scan off of the original negative. And what people don't quite understand sometimes, is that the more, like you're saying, the further you get from the original, the more diluted the quality gets, and you don't know what you're looking at anymore.
Now, speaking of photographic evidence where you don't know what you're looking at, just really quickly, there's been a lot of mistakes and a lot of shadows that people have turned into people in a lot of different photographs, and I mean in depository windows, on the grassy knoll, everywhere. There's a huge amount of them. But let's talk about one of the most famous misdirections in photographic evidence where you have a delusion of the image, okay? And that would be, hey, the limo driver shot him.
Yep.
Okay. Anybody, I'll throw it out there. Any one of you, go right ahead.
Cooper.
This is the Bill Cooper synopsis, where he, or synopsis, excuse me, the Bill Cooper hypothesis.
Guess.
Okay. I was being nice, but this is the Bill Cooper hypothesis, where he says that he knows for sure that the limo driver shot him in the face, and then goes on to tell us that it was with a certain kind of gun and that it was poison and all this other stuff. Okay. The problem here is that not only does he say that, but he says it's backed up by documents that he saw while he was working with the Pacific Fleet somewhere, which has nothing to do with the Secret Service in the 1970s, so it was verified by that. Wrong.
Yep.
There's no reason for that documentation to have passed over his desk, even if he was in such a position to see such classified documents, okay? So that's the end of that story. But the real problem here is that there was a misrepresented Zapruder film, which, anybody want to talk about the condition of that film?
I think that Zach's the expert. I'm willing to weigh in once they do.
Well, what version are we talking about?
What would generally be called the Cooper version of the Zapruder film.
Oh, yes. I've tried to track that down. I have some friends that have, a lot of faith in Bill Cooper. He's got quite a reputation among conspiratorial-minded people. And it appears in his film, isn't it something like There Rides a Dark Horse or something like that?
Well, actually, I'll tell you what the history is without a problem. Because, sad to say, somewhere around 1990, and I do believe it might have been more like 1989, when I first got involved in the case, I used to do something called videotape trading, where I would trade videotapes of all sorts of rare things with other people through the mail. I know it sounds like a really crazy, arcane idea, but believe me, it used to happen.
That's legwork we thankfully do not have to do anymore.
Right. But the thing is that I actually received one of the Bill Cooper productions during that time, which means that I got probably the second or third version that he put out from him. Okay.
Wow.
So what that was called was Assassin Unmasked originally. That was the graphic that he put on it with I figured it out later, it was a Gold Star VCR that you could actually insert graphics into videotapes with if you used it properly. Okay. Anyway, this is what he used, and he had a very, very, like, I don't know how many generations removed from a broadcast of the Zapruder film that he utilized in his presentation. So, what happens to a videotape when you keep recording it onto another videotape?
A copy of a copy of a copy.
It degrades.
And the image begins to blur, the colors begin to melt into one another, a lot of odd things happen, and this film, again, is not exactly the highest quality to begin with.
Yeah.
Okay. But the problem is, of course, technology being what it was in the late 80s, this is what he presented as, and if you look at this thing, and at a glance, at an uneducated glance, you could almost believe that there is a gun in the film. Okay? Problem is, if you look at a clear version of the film, you know there's no gun, you know exactly what that shiny thing is, you know why it seems as though, the hand goes one way when it doesn't actually go anywhere and everything else. If you look at a clear copy of it, if you look at even a remotely clear copy of the Zapruder film, you won't see this. It's not there.
Yeah. And I think that's the unfortunate case with a lot of these things, is that people want to believe there's something there, but without evidence of it, it doesn't matter. We're just arguing endlessly about things we cannot prove. So why are we arguing about them?
No, I hear you. And I want to hear from Trish on some of this stuff, too. So please get involved, Trish. Because
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Because I'll talk way too much.
I was going to say the Zapruder film.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, throw yourself under the bus, buddy. Sorry, Trish.
I think that it's important. It's okay. I think it's important to follow the history of whose hands actually touched everything. For example, and this is just my opinion, but Robert Groden was the first one who brought it out, obviously, in Goodnight America. And I don't know if people are familiar with his technique called Grodenscoping, but it seems that every film that came out at some point went through his hands, one another. And I think it's important because, again, your information is only as credible as your source. And if the source is in question, then you have to question everything. So again, I think with all the photos, whether it be the Marianne Moorman photo, the Zapruder film, the Nix film, etc., I think it's extremely important to follow where the original film went in the history and who made copies and what generation. That goes ampfold with Dictabelt, for example. I mean, Gary Mack brought it out during the HSCA committee, and, later on, Steve Barber later disputed it with acoustics findings. And I think that it's very important to follow the history of the physical film itself.
Yeah, and Trish raises a good point about the Grodenscoping, which is basically like an animation technique. And when they aired it on Goodnight America, he basically interspersed it with different clips, and he wasn't explaining where it came from and what he did. And people were trying to, is this really what we're seeing here? And then, in reality, no, that wasn't it. It was it was altered. And not to, point blame, but that happened.
I mean, even to the point where he had taken quite a few films and basically spliced them together. So you have a moment by moment from the time he turns off Main Street onto Houston Street. There's different films that he has spliced, which to a certain degree, again, is modifying it to make it as a one solid running film. And again, you have to take that into account. He may not have manipulated in the sense where he's actually changed things on the film, but at the end of the day, you're not viewing the original film. And I think that that's really important, that the actual physical film needs to be followed, not only with just the pictures, but who had their hands on it. I mean, the more you dig into how many copies were made, who got copies of any of the films, it's really quite astonishing to realize that, it could have been tampered with multiple different sources. And just the fact that the Zapruder film has been spliced is evidence that it was modified some way. And again, I'm not saying that anything in regards to the actual headshot and making his head go backwards versus forward, etc. I'm saying that at the end of the day, basically because there is splices on it, somewhere along the line, it was tampered with.
Right, and that, that could be one of the bigger myths itself, is that, people believing that the Zapruder film is a legit, historical record of what took place. And like Trish said, the fact that even if 1 or 2 frames were removed, someone had a motive to do so, and it's not accurate anymore.
I totally agree. I think that this also goes into other evidence as well with the chain of custody, how Trish said you have to keep track. If the chain of custody is broken, the evidence is no good. You have to then verify it with other evidence and see if it's still verifiable.
No, absolutely.
Right.
And
that's exactly it.
And the whole thing about exactly what Grodin did, we discussed that with Gail Nix Jackson on this show, actually, because she said for the first time anybody realized that, part of what Grodin was presenting that night on Good Night America was actually part of her grandfather's film. She said, I didn't think anybody else saw that. I knew it right away.
That's exactly it.
And he didn't even make that clear as he was presenting it.
That's right.
No, he said it was commercial.
And again, just how he got access to all these films is also very unruly. I mean, there's no clear-cut indication of how Grodin got these films.
Well, yeah, the Zapruder film itself, there's kind of a decent trail of how you can figure out how he got his hands on that mechanics copy and all of that. That's reasonable. But when you get into the rest of the nexus of Grodin's collection, it's another story.
Well,
exactly.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I think that since you guys brought up Grodin, so they can't blame me. One of my problems with him, he seems like a lovely fellow. When I met him in Dealey Plaza, he seemed pleasant. But he was one of the attendees at what I like to call the Judith Very Baker grave party, where they all went to Oswald's grave and basically threw a party and took pictures. I have a problem with that. I don't care about anyone in this case personally. I don't know them. I wasn't alive when they were. But have a little respect. Don't go to someone's grave and take pictures and make an event out of it. How about take your story, your myth, as I like to call it, and present it somewhere else where a dead body isn't buried?
I don't know who could argue with that. I didn't understand that when I heard about it. I have not understood a lot of the exploitation of a lot of people that have since passed on and have had their words twisted around.
Yeah.
But, wow.
And that's, I think, part of our deal. I think, people, they're like, what drives you, Carmine? Well, one of the things is all the dead people that so many people keep impugning, that the dead people deserve some respect from both sides. I didn't agree with Jim Garrison, but he doesn't deserve to be treated like scum. And I'm tired of people doing it. I'm tired of people treating people on the other side like scum, too. We're either going to solve this together or we're going to argue forever about nothing.
And I take this time to say to everybody who is interested in the truth about 9/11, you need to take a lesson from this. Because although the technology has improved, believe me, the same thing can happen there. If you legitimately believe that a new investigation is required, take the lessons from the JFK research community and understand you can be held off for half a century and on into perpetuity, okay, by stuff like this.
Well, another thing that, you're hitting on, and this goes right in with 9/11 too, is that these are people, and Carmine hinted at this, is that these are people's memories. This isn't just some fantasy story that's a detective story that we can sit and nitpick about for our own entertainment. There's people's feelings, memories, family members involved in this, and it needs to be treated with respect.
You're right. I totally agree with all of you. And I hope that it starts to carry across the community because I'm tired of people. You know what? I love to joke, as I'm sure some of the people who debate me know. But I'll joke about subjects. I don't joke about people. I don't go after people directly, though they do love to come for me.
Well, and you know what? While we're at
another...
it... Go ahead. Go ahead, Zach.
No, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Oh, it's okay.
I was just going to say, beyond
Yeah, go ahead.
Beyond the memories of the deceased, we have to take into account the legacy of the people that are still with us and how they were affected. I mean, one of the things that upset Trish and I a lot was the way that sometimes Marina Oswald is being portrayed, and the way that the memories of her and Lee Oswald are being scattered about. I mean, you see, 50-year-old rumors of their love life being bandied about like it's just some sort of barbershop gossip. And I find that offensive. I mean, the Marina is still with us, and obviously, and her children, and that's their family and their father. And I mean, goodness, it seems to, get quite ugly at times.
I just think a lot of people don't understand that, 50 years have passed, and people that are completely innocent, for example, Marina and Lee's children, this impacts them daily. I mean, and to have not only their father smeared, but their mother being smeared has to be difficult. And at the end of the day, we need to respect the fact that, whether Lee was innocent or guilty, his children are innocent bystanders in this, his grandchildren. And I think that it comes down to just respecting the children. I mean, again, they weren't around when a lot of this was happening. And if they were, they don't remember it. And I think it's very important. And I think that people lose sight of that, like Zach was saying. These are real people, a real situation. It's not just some sort of movie that we're following. And, it needs to be recognized as traumatic event for a lot of people, whether they were witnesses to the actual assassination or, indirectly involved with it. People need to respect that there are people that are still attached to the memory of these people that are being trashed. And that was personally what alarms me, is how petty and how insignificant that these conversations have become, knocking everybody. And I'm not saying that I agree with everything Marina says and she's a saint by any means. What I'm saying is, at the end of the day, whether you respect what she had to say in her testimony or not, at the end of the day, her children deserve that respect.
Yeah, and it's one thing, I think, to discuss it in Facebook or in forums, that I don't have a problem with people criticizing, but criticize with some evidence. Don't just criticize to criticize, otherwise you're wasting everyone's time.
Well, exactly. And Marina is one of those people, though, that I view, regardless of what everybody else thinks of her, I view her as an absolute victim, because, look at what she was faced with. Immediately the government turned on her. The whole country was going to turn on her. She's the wife of the assassin. She's the commie wife of the assassin, first of all. Then ever after, she's being chased down by people that are trying to, elicit all sorts of details from her that were really inappropriate, and most of the time she had no knowledge of. She's continuously called on the carpet for things, and even though she's remarried, she's forever Marina Oswald. And pretty much, I mean, her children don't even have a public life for the most part, based on this whole thing.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
I think this might lead us perfectly into someone else you and I wanted to put on the list, Chuck.
Well, go right ahead, Carmine, because I know where you're going.
If I may start then. Judith Very Baker. She, to me, represents one of the largest feasible myth makers in our community. Someone who has wasted 15 years of everyone's time.
Go ahead, Zach and Trish, because go ahead.
Well, I really don't want to make this a personal attack on Judith, but in my opinion, I think that if you're going to explain a story such as she has, again, not only is evidence required, but on the same token, of course, people are going to pick it apart. I mean, people are going to analyze what she says. They're going to look for new clues based off her statements. And I really do feel that sometimes the attitude from her and the people that believe her and are basing their belief solely on faith that she's telling the truth really do end up making more of a divide in the community than really what's necessary. I mean, it's really a line drawn in the sand. Either you're with us or against us. If, for myself, I've said this many times, you can believe in a conspiracy and Lee's innocent without believing her story. And that's personally how I feel. I don't believe Judy Baker at all. I really don't. I really find that her story is very well fabricated and woven in to historic facts, but at the end of the day, she doesn't have anything to back it up other than some WTs, and she worked with Oswald. I think that people need to really analyze everything, and that's not just with her story. That's with a lot of researchers.
Yeah.
You know, we're still discussing the same stuff that was brought up 25 years ago. You know, there's got to be more information out there, and I think that people need to really kind of dig in their heels and start analyzing everything from square one. And I'm even talking about the Warren Commission, the HSCA, and everything else that has been officially documented. People need to go through every statement with a fine-tooth comb, and they have to be unbiased about it. If you go in with the attitude that Lee's innocent, of course you're not going to notice anything else. Same versus if you go in it wholeheartedly that Lee's guilty. You have to go into each piece of evidence and statements and look at it with unbiased eyes, and you have to follow both sides as far as they take you.
Yeah, and you have to go to the primary evidence. Don't go to books. Books are great
Exactly.
if you want to check out people's opinions on the evidence, but books are not definitive. Books are secondary sources.
Right, and I've said several times that what I usually do with a book is I read through it once to see, you know, if it even seems remotely possible that anything is valuable in it. I go through it a second time and begin to break down exactly their citations, where they come from. You know, this is why I'm not a fan of Lamar Waldron. But anyway.
Yeah, I don't mean to. Sorry, I deviated from the topic.
Yeah.
Let me just do a quick greatest hits. The reasons why I do not believe Judith Baker. She has no primary evidence. Her name never appears in any single file she has ever been able to present since the first time I asked her months ago till now. She claimed that she made anthrax on the education forum. Anyone can go there and check it. And I suggest that you read my article, Trish's article, Matthew Schofield's article. There's quite a few articles about her and why her story shall never work. Now, the anthrax thing, she needed training that she didn't have time for. Once again, timeline problems like the commission, because she said she was 19 and she was doing these things. It takes years. She was a lab assistant at best. She never made a cancer bioweapon because there's no evidence of it. There's no evidence that that technology even existed at the time. So when I hear her repeat it over and over, you can repeat something so much as you like, just like the commission did. It doesn't make it true.
Well, that is part of the problem. But every time you begin to break down even the smallest thing in one of her, you know, in one of her stories, it seems to me, it falls apart based on the context.
Yeah.
Really great thing that that Zach and Trish did recently. I wonder if you guys would like kind of give people the idea of that article you guys just put out.
Reverend Jim.
Reverend Jim, yes, because I pointed to the very same. I pointed to the very same situation in an article years ago. Okay, but my whole thing was the ridiculousness of misprinting the word "new." I'm sorry, that's not something that a dyslexic would do who hails from New Orleans. Okay, find me anybody who is knowledgeable on the subject of dyslexia and tell me that they're going to get a subject who does that as a grown male. Go ahead and find one. Okay, but okay, we'll leave that alone. You guys came up with something though that I thought was just wow. So please tell everybody.
Well, when we started into this, again, we were more interested in, we started looking up Lillian Moret's testimony. And what jumped out at us was this lettering job that Lee had basically not received. He had been practicing his lettering, and Mrs. Moret had stated that her 6-year-old neighbor's daughter could do a better job at lettering. So we started looking into that a little bit, and then we ended up looking into the Warren Commission and finding that 2 individuals were interviewed at a place called the Ad Shop, and that was located on South Rampart. When we started doing a little bit more digging and pulling up newspapers, we actually found the ad for the lettering job that Lee had applied for, and it was for a large advertising company, which was very interesting. So just on a fluke, we were reading through Judy Berry Baker's book, and she had mentioned it 18 times that they had been doing some lettering and some painting at this shop. So we started looking into the shop a little bit more in the area and the history of the area, and basically, it just came back that it wasn't possible. It just wasn't possible. The segregation and the tension in that time, especially with the Freedom Riders that were doing their bus tour from Washington to New Orleans, that was a good indication of the tension that was building up in that time period. And when we started looking into Reverend James, who she refers to as Reverend Jim, and again, James is his last name, so I don't know why she would shorten his last name as Jim, but aside from that, we discovered that he was in fact a black man. So we started researching white people working for blacks back then. And that came directly into the Jim Crow laws of that time and the segregation and how, for example, a black child could not play in a baseball diamond within 2-block radius of the white community. So that started setting off bells. So again, we did as much research as we could trying to find pictures of this location. Unfortunately, we were never able to find an actual picture of this shop, but we were able to find some history dating back to the 1900s in the Jewish community and a lot of stores that were run there. And then once we started realizing how rough of a neighborhood this was and how to put this politely, how 2 white individuals would stick out like a sore thumb in this neighborhood. And again, they would literally be breaking the law by working for a black man. And again, they needed separate bathrooms, they needed separate eating areas for the white employees if this was possible. And to be honest, we couldn't find one example of white people working for the coloreds back then. There was a lot of information about how employers would have to sign off and take responsibility for black employees and that sort of thing. But we couldn't find one example of Caucasian people working for coloreds during that time period.
Right, and Judith neglected to mention in her book, she and to her credit, seemed to be forward-minded about civil rights, but no, not at a single time did she mention that that James was an African American, and I think that would be a very significant thing for her to mention. And like the way that the laws were worded is basically that they would have had to have provided these expensive accommodations. And from all historic references, Reverend James's place was quite a small place, and we can't determine how this would have ever taken place.
Well, right, and just to clarify really quickly, the fact that you guys are using the term colored is because that was contemporaneous with the time.
Yeah, it's in the documents.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what they said.
Right.
There was, white and colored. This was the definitions of the separation. That's the root of what was going on. So this is why you guys are actually using that term. I just want to make that clear.
We want to save ourselves some attacks.
Yes.
That's another thing I'd like to discuss too, is that all of us have received threats. All of us, and I'm talking right now, have received, people swearing at us. That goes to the other box for me now because I started a block list that I'm more than happy to pass out to anyone listening.
Yeah.
Because that's the way I think that this is my opinion, and everyone can disagree with me all they like. But the only way it seems in some cases that we are going to raise the conversation above these people who do not wish to talk about evidence is to get rid of them, to put them in a part of Facebook where they can rant by themselves away from the rest of us who use evidence.
And not just Facebook, Carmine. I mean, there are the various forums. All right. There are the various areas where they comment, they go after you on, YouTube, believe me, I had a history of these people on YouTube that you would not believe. back when YouTube had a, like an email type system, man, I could not go 3 hours.
Yeah, no, and we're not, I just want to state to everyone listening too, we are not Judith Baker. We're not saying, oh, we're poor victims, please. No. We'll fight you, but bring the evidence, pal, because we're not just going to sit there and argue with you about poetry.
Well, yeah, there you go. And, and the ignorant arguments and attacking people personally and all this other stuff, for whatever ails them. I mean, look, I don't talk about people that have nervous conditions, which clearly do, things like that.
And we're not saying we're not saying, I'm sorry, and please, Trish and Zach, chime in after, I promise I'll make this quick, because me and Chuck will go forever because we like to talk to each other. But But, the bottom line is you're here to do research, and you're here to do evidence, and you're here to progress this case, or you're in the way. Those are the only two types of people here.
Right, and just really quickly, phone callers, please hold off until I ask for you, because I've already had to dismiss a couple, and I'm sorry about that, but I'm not quite ready for you, because we got a few more things on the list that I want to make sure we hit.
I'm ready to move beyond Baker whenever you are. I just hope the community's ready to as well.
No, that's just a taste of what's wrong. Okay, there are a myriad of circumstances, problems with the historical context of what she's saying, difficulty believing a whole lot of other things. Take note of interviews where she's completely upset by homosexuals, but meanwhile, whether people realize it or not, there are some people who have been outed in the case, and there are still people to this day that it is not public knowledge were homosexuals that she claims to be surrounded by.
Yeah.
Okay, that's an oddity that I don't think anybody brings up, and I have a little theory about that, but it's only a theory, because Oswald seems to move in circles where there are closeted homosexuals.
Yeah.
But anyway,
well,
that
one of the
has
things
to do with the reality of his movements, though, and I mean to tell you that that's an international thing. Okay, so yeah, go back and look at that, anybody who's researching Oswald, please, and see if you can explain it, because I have an explanation, but I don't feel confident enough to really settle it out in public yet.
Do you mind if I plug Rob Clark real quick?
Oh, no, absolutely. The lone gunman. Yes, sir.
If you get a chance, everyone, please listen to Rob Clark's, I believe it was episode 51, the Evidence and Documents episode. We talk about another thing Judith apparently, being such a supposed close friend of David Ferrie, forgot to mention, which is a document I found that shows that he was running feasibly a child sex cult called Omnipotent. So this is not the person in her latest book that she presents. No. David Ferrie is not a good person. He's not jovial. He's not nice. He was a lunatic. He was a madman who had militaristic dreams and was trying to use Boy Scouts for his sexual desires.
Well, and see, now, I don't know that I can even go that far because I haven't seen all this stuff, to be honest with you.
Oh, no, I'll show you everything. And even, here's the thing. It's a matter of how many of these documents, because there's that one. I found one where he tried to go into a hospital to convince a young boy not to testify against him. How many times does the evidence have to indicate something until this woman realizes she's wrong?
Right. Well, like we've all said, though, we don't want to spend the whole time.
Yeah, and we could.
I mean, look, if we do part 2 and 3.
Hey, we'll do it again. I'll bring the documents, I promise.
I see devoting an episode to this and spending some special time on how it is you derive 500 pages after knowing somebody for a summer. But
yeah, well, someone said Judith is kind of like a slow train wreck, and I said, well, there's plenty of room on the train for all the myth makers.
That's absolutely true. Let's move on to a couple of other myths, if that's okay with you guys, Trish and Zach.
Sure, go for it.
And I'm sorry, it's 3 months of repressed anger.
No, and I understand. Because as I told you, I tried warning people about this years ago, that this was going to become a bigger problem. And they did not take me seriously. They really did not. Because, after all, I'm not the most highly educated guy who studied this. So I don't really know what I'm talking about. Nobody's ever going to take that seriously. It's just another one of those, things that Nigel Turner did, and don't worry about it. And
you know what? That's another myth, in my opinion, because I'm proud to work with people who bring evidence. I don't care about titles. I don't care about their education. I'll take a reasonable man over an educated fool every day of the week.
Amen to that, brother. So let's move on to a couple of other things, okay, that are constantly bandied about, especially in alternative media. And I don't know who wants to jump on this one. I'm hoping that either Trish or Zach grab this first, because I know this will be fun for you, Carmine, but I'd like to hear from them.
Yes, I'm sorry. I promise I won't talk again until they're done.
Okay. George H.W. Bush in Dealey Plaza.
Well, yeah, that's always been an interesting one, and this gets back once again to trying to identify people in less than pristine photographs or images that are not quite clear, right? And there's been, a picture taken of showing a guy, that's not exactly 100% quite certain who this gentleman is, and then people say, well, look at this hairline, look at this posture, this has to be George Bush. I mean, and that's quite irresponsible. I mean, and people have gone so far as to try to statistically prove that Bush was there and he had to be, and this has to be Bush. And I'm not naming names. It's a certain gentleman who loves the statistics that I've talked to about this several times. But I mean, but it gets back to what would it prove if he was there? I mean, he's not holding a rifle. I mean, and what is it going to solve?
Well, there, I just dropped the comparison photo because I put that in the chat room for you guys listening and in the chat room. So you can see from another angle the figure that is alleged to be George H.W. Bush and the same figure from another angle. Just look at it for yourselves.
Go ahead.
I just say look
I'd
at
like
it
to
for
make
yourselves.
a point.
Go ahead.
I'd like to make a point here. And in some of the archival work I've done, part of the job that I had to do was to identify individuals in photographs. And sometimes you'll get photographs of people that from families, and some family member later on down the road will write a name on the back of the picture. These are people that they knew, and they'll write a name on the back of the picture, and you can prove that it wasn't even the proper person that they're identifying, that they were misidentifying somebody that they knew face to face in a photograph. So how is it that people are so certain that they know who an individual is in a photograph that A, they've never met, and B, they don't even have access to the original photograph to begin with? I mean, it's absolutely it's a waste of time.
Right, but I mean, like I said, one of the really great methods is to cross-reference. If you have a multitude of photographs, of a body of people from particularly different angles, which we do have a nexus of photographs here in Dealey Plaza, you can compare one figure to another and sort of begin to play match game with them, and you can see them from different angles. I mean, much like that whole, Jack Ruby is in front of the book depository thing, that was incorrect as well. It just
exactly. This should ultimately, if you're going to go that route, it should be ultimately left to forensic experts, or B, experts in anatomy, people that understand exactly what they're looking at. Lay people trying to identify people based on a hairline or something like that. It's beyond the scope of what a lay person should be able to accomplish.
I think a big part of it, too, is hypothetically, if George Bush was involved with this assassination in any form or way, do you really think that he would put himself in that position to be photographed? Do you really think that he would be on site? I mean, to me, that doesn't make sense.
He was attempting to run a Senate campaign at the time. Would he put himself out there?
Yeah, you guys are totally right. I waited.
Cool.
But, okay. You guys are totally right, because that's my contention with everybody that ever says they see someone there. If you want a plot to go off, you don't show up at the crime scene. Only a moron shows up at the crime scene.
Exactly.
Yeah, and over the years, I believe I saw a graph one time compiled by somebody who decided to figure this out. They alleged something like, 500 historical figures have been accused to have been at Dealey Plaza in one way or another through somebody's work over the years. And I imagine that they didn't actually get to all of the literature. Okay. So,
well, if I may quote the commission, which I am loath to do, but when they get it right, they get it right.
Credit where credit's due. Go ahead.
There is still another category of speculation and rumor that complicated and broadened the work of the commission. Numerous people claim to have seen Oswald or Ruby at various times and places in the United States or abroad. Others insisted that during those days, following the assassination, they had detected significant actions on television that were witnessed by no one else.
Well, right. I mean, including people that swore up and down that they actually saw the assassination broadcast live that day. That was actually an assertion for
right.
many years. And there is no way that that happened. It did not happen.
Yeah, but they still go on, and
Yeah.
hopefully this will help be the movement to start the stoppage of that.
Well, again, I know we could treat these subjects to long discussions, but I'm trying to jump around so that we can actually get to some of these phone calls.
Next.
James Files, if you don't mind.
Oh, Files. You guys want to go first?
The grassy knoll, for those who don't know,
Yeah, I'll
Mr.
say-
Sutton. Mr. Sutton is his name.
Jimmy.
Jim Sutton, who is, prisoner at Joliet, I think, still, right?
Yep.
Anyway, been interviewed a few times, has confessed to being the shooter on the grassy knoll. Go ahead, Trish.
Well, I have a couple things I'd like to bring up about Badgeman. First and foremost, it has been documented that Gary Mack and Jack White weren't actually the ones that first found the Badgeman. It was actually Ruth Carter Stapleton, who was Jimmy Carter's sister.
Correct.
She was the first one who actually pointed out that there was an individual in the Marianne Mormon photo. First story that went around was, of course, Roscoe White. His son came forward saying that everything was in his diary. It was all documented, so on and so forth. And then through analysis of the ink used in the diary, it was then established that his wife, Mrs. White, was actually the one who wrote up that diary. Once that story basically became dead in the water, then all of a sudden Files comes into it. And for myself, I find that very intriguing, especially considering Beverly Oliver had stated that she did, in fact, see Roscoe White that day. So again, the story evolves once something is knocked down. And I think that's really important. And I think eventually, in my opinion, I think the James file will be another one of the Roscoe White stories. Well, it will eventually just fade out because, again, it comes down to evidence and proof. And I think that there's just too much pointing, and again, this is just my opinion, that the shot didn't come from the grassy knoll. I do believe something happened there, whether it was a diversion or something to get people to run up there. I do wholeheartedly believe that. But if you look at, I believe it's called the KGB Secret Files of the Kennedy Assassination, Robert Groden and amongst others, and I'm sorry, I can't recall who all was involved with it at this point, but they actually blocked off Dealey Plaza and did a laser test of it. And when you see how Robert Groden tries to match up the headshot with the grassy knoll, it's impossible. The bullet could not have done a U-turn in JFK's head. And by all accounts, it appears that the shot either came from the front or from the back. And again, when you take into account Custer's testimony, and again, Custer's obviously one of those people that either you believe him or you don't, it seems to make a lot more sense given the information that he stated in his testimony. So again, I do believe wholeheartedly something happened on the grassy knoll that got people's attention and got them running that way. And again, in my opinion, I believe it was a diversion. But if you actually look at how the bullet entered the head from the right side and then exited the right side as well, I mean, that's physically impossible.
Right, and for trajectory information, I would say, take a look at somebody like Sherry Feaster, who's also been a guest on this show.
Exactly.
She's great.
Exactly.
An actual crime scene investigator.
Yeah, an expert. Fancy that.
Yeah,
that's right.
An actual
Her
expert.
information is definitely hands down.
Right, and as far as the files,
it all comes.
Sorry, as far as the files thing goes, though, I just want to say one thing about that. The Roscoe White timing is a lot longer than you guys probably think. You guys think of the Ricky White thing as the first time the Roscoe White thing came out, but no, that was introduced earlier. And it all actually came from the fact that Roscoe White's widow turned over one of the backyard photographs to the House Select Committee at one point.
Yes, she did.
And she had a copy. She had a copy that nobody else had.
Right.
Now that's easily explainable, believe it or not, without adding Roscoe White to the conspiracy.
Right.
But,
the fact of the matter is that pieces of evidence seem to disappear from the police station in Dallas, and if Roscoe White was a cop and being around there, that would make perfect sense.
A lot of evidence was being taken as souvenirs.
Right.
Thank you. Exactly my reasoning, which is, which I knew from actually speaking to Dallas police officers. But okay.
Well, what would they know, Chuck?
Well, they wouldn't know much. They were just, the...
There.
Yeah, I know. But anyway, the Jimmy File story, the problem is that it doesn't line up with the existing evidence. It doesn't line up with reason. You can't find the figure that Files would be in any of the photographic evidence, and it falls apart on the face of it. Bob Vernon is the guy who actually sold it to Wim Dankbar, and Wim does his thing with it, and that's the world according to Wim. I don't know what to say.
Well, and that's fine. If
the same category to me.
I'm sorry.
Files and Baker fall into the same category for me.
Yeah, they do. Well, no, they are. As far as I'm concerned, they're the same thing. They both go back to Dankbar. That's the issue, is that not only do we have these myth makers, we have people funding them.
Which is a whole other interesting issue. But anyway, let's continue to tackle this stuff, because believe it or not, we're through the first hour, guys.
I know. We could go all day, I'm sure.
So let's get on to, this is one of my favorites, by the way. LBJ is the mastermind of the assassination.
Oof.
Now, this is a long, drawn-out mythology, okay? Why do I say that? Well, it's kind of logical, considering in the 1960s, if you think to yourself, well, he became president. If you're talking about 1966, 1967, you might think to yourself that LBJ might have something to do with it. First of all, it was public knowledge that the guy had all sorts of corruption charges around him, okay? It was. The whole Bobby Baker scandal, not something that was discovered, by Bar McClellan, okay? The fact is that the Bobby Baker scandal, if you listen to broadcasts of local radio in Dallas and Fort Worth that day, you can hear the headlines about the Bobby Baker scandal while JFK is visiting Dallas, okay? If you don't believe me, I'll send you the file. Moving on, he's assassinated Kennedy in the state where Johnson's from. So it's not a horrendous thing to imagine that LBJ could be involved. He benefited because he became president. He obviously had control of certain things in that state. I mean, after all, John Connolly is directly relatable to him. The other guy was wounded in the car. Okay, whole lot of other people that are involved in the motorcade, the choice of buildings, all these kinds of things. It makes kind of sense. But there's a problem. A problem. That's funny. There's a lot of problems here. And I have given people the context. And Carmine, if you want to start, go ahead. But I want to make sure we hear from Zach and Trish on this too.
Okay, I'll let them go first if they wish. I want to be more. They are the people I would like to be the stars. They are the new guests.
Oh, no. You're doing a wonderful
You go ahead,
job.
Carmen.
Thank you, guys. Well, this is a special place in my heart because it relates to a guy I'm sure that everyone in the Garrison group wanted me to give a shout out to, Dave Sharp. Dave is an interesting fellow who has constantly shadowed most of our forums trying to push the LBJ myth. And I tried to explain it to Dave, but he wouldn't listen. So hopefully if he's listening now, he'll listen this time. It is highly improbable that Lyndon Baines Johnson was part of the conspiracy. He was part of the cover-up. I will give everyone that. He was totally part of the cover-up. He didn't want any of this to escalate into something he couldn't control. So that I think is fairly established by evidence, and most reasonable people can accept Lyndon Johnson, like all the other politicians, didn't want this to turn into something else. However, he likely had no part in the assassination. Now, what you said people say, well, it was in Texas. Yeah, it was, which would obviously link back to him. So why would he do it where it would link back to him?
That's a big problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
And here's the thing. I am willing to accept the idea, and I'm going to let, Trish and Zach get on this, but I'm willing to accept the idea that somebody tapped him on the shoulder and said, you're going to be president soon. I'm willing to accept that. I'm willing to accept that he might have even had some foreknowledge, although he wasn't ducking at the time and all that other nonsense. But that aside, I'm willing to accept that possibility. I'm willing to accept that a completely corrupt politician got swept up in something, tried to control the investigation, especially through his personal relationship with J. Edgar Hoover. Okay,
Hoover.
So Hoover, again, who, basically framed and let go anybody he wanted to and controlled loads of dirty information on people from the inception of his office with the FBI. But okay, I'll accept all of that. But him planning it, hell of a reward to only have one shadow presidency of his own, to wind up a broken man, and to have his legacy destroyed.
Exactly.
Okay.
And how about the shooting gallery? Why would he be there? If there was a miss, anyone could be hit.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I absolutely believe the phone call where he's talking to Hoover, and he says, were any of those bullets intended for me? That sounded like an honest question, especially considering there is no way in hell he had any idea that anybody in the public would ever get to hear that tape. That was for his private use.
Yeah, whenever I hear people talk about the tapes and the things that he could have said, he wouldn't have been using as many racial epithets if he thought that these tapes were going to be listened to.
Much like Nixon.
Yeah.
I'd like to bring up an interesting anecdote that relates to this, and it's the story of Godfrey McHugh, who was in the Air Force, and he was originally supposed to ride in the presidential limo and got moved incidentally. Mm-hmm. But after the assassination, Godfrey McHugh wanted to track down Johnson and get permission to take off, and they couldn't find him. And they found Johnson evidently in the bathroom of Air Force One crying and telling McHugh, look out, this is a conspiracy. And why, if he was the mastermind of it, would he be crying and telling one of his generals that this was a conspiracy?
Yeah, Johnson had doubts, too, for years. I have documents that I'm more than happy to share with you guys and those who are interested, where Walter Jenkins, his personal assistant, told Hoover that Johnson was having a moment of doubt where he said he knew the CIA were somehow involved. I mean, Johnson was not the villain that so many have wasted time trying to portray. He was a villain. He wasn't a good man, but that doesn't mean he was the leader of the assassination.
Oh, yeah, let me be very clear. I'm not saying that this guy was innocent in any way, shape, or form. What I'm saying is he's not the planner, he's not the architect of what happened here.
No,
that's
he's not smart enough. I'm sorry to say.
All of the like you're saying, the recording saying that he thought one of the bullets was, wondering if one of them was meant for him, and him being upset about this seems to me to indicate that he knew that something was going on, but he in no way was the one that planned it.
And I also think by him being in the parade, I think that he was close enough to hear the shots, and that's a very powerful thought. If you think about it, he just witnessed the man above him being murdered. And I think it's very powerful that he knew that potentially that could happen to him too. And I like to use the expression, he heard the shots. He knew what potentially could happen to him. And I think that's really important. And at that point, he was expendable in the sense that he was easy to maneuver the way they wanted him to.
But isn't that the case with all these guys post-Kennedy? And I believe that also, believe it or not, Nixon was removed for the same reason, that he wasn't cooperating.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, okay. Assassination's not their only tool.
Right.
Absolutely. And they had already decapitated. Right.
I think Nixon bit the hand that fed him.
You got it. You got it. I am so glad to be on the air with you guys. You have no idea. I'm going to tell you what. Now I'm going to open those phone lines. I'm going to open those phone lines, though, and I don't know what we're going to get. But I invite anybody who wants to call in now to ask about any of the subjects we've covered or anything else related to the case. And you know what? If I've got any sort of clue or any of my guests have any sort of clue, we'll be more than happy to give you our ideas about what's what. Okay? And let's not forget that, there are the major myths and there are also the minor myths. Okay? There were fake Secret Service agents everywhere. That was bandied about for many, many years.
The sewer shot from X-Files.
The sewer shot, which is an impossibility. And let me just back up with a little bit of evidence on the fake Secret Service agents and how so many witnesses saw them, okay? The first thing is, there is a Secret Service agent named Lem Johns. If you could just turn down your radio. There we go.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, man. Hold on just a second. Secret Service agent Lem Johns. Take a look at his testimony and just imagine for a moment that he's not lying. It is very easy to see how a Secret Service agent running around with his credentials open at that time could be spotted by various people in the crowd who are frozen, some of which have thrown themselves on the ground. So there ends a whole lot of that speculation. Maybe not all of it, but let's try and trace these things back to the evidence, okay? So I have one caller on. I have another one coming in. Charles first, though. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. How are you guys doing?
Doing all right.
So hey, Charles,
hey,
how's it going?
I'm doing good, folks. We're finally talking face-to-face after messaging back and forth for the last God knows how long.
And you are live on the air, so
no doubt.
Please go ahead and contribute to the conversation.
All right. Well, basically, I've been listening since just after you guys started about an hour ago or whatnot, and you guys have been knocking them off. My neck's getting sore from nodding from what you guys keep saying, because everything you're saying, one after another, is like bang on. I mean, you've got Doorway Man, you've got LBJ did it, you've got I'm not even going to bring up JVB, and the one that really bugs me the most, because I run, as a lot of you may know, a JFK site, is the limo driver. That just bugs me to no end, because we get it constantly, and it just bugs me because it's so easy to disprove, but you get these stubborn people on there, and this is true with all of the subjects, you get these stubborn people on there, and they don't want to admit that they're wrong, even when you can show straight up that they're wrong. It's just nonsense.
Yeah, they personalize it, unfortunately.
Yeah, and why do people get so personal over this? I mean, it's one thing to have a disagreement. You can disagree with someone and still be respectful towards them. But so many people make it so personal that you disagree, let's start insulting them. What for?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
That's right. That's right.
It bugs me when people do that. And, I mean, I'm not one to do that. You guys have dealt with me long enough to know that. But there's so many people out there that do. And it just, even like, I'll even say if there are people that I discuss, and I think you guys know them too, guys like, Fred James, Steve Rowe, and so on. Most of these people are lone gunmen. Oswald did it on their own stuff, and I completely disagree with that. But there's no reason why, even though we disagree with them, we can't talk to them in a respectful manner.
Yeah.
But there's other people that have the same opinion where you can't.
And just really quickly, of course, David Von Pine has an excellent video collection. Okay.
Yes, he does.
Anyway.
He doesn't like to debate much with me, but yeah, he's got a real nice bunch of videos.
Yes, that's true.
Okay, two things. First of all, unknown caller, I can't accept you because if I do, it will knock us off the network. Okay, so you're going to have to unblock your number if you want to get in.
Uh-oh.
Next thing is...
I wonder who they're from.
But I wanted to make that announcement. Plus, we also have another caller on 617. How you doing? 617 there.
I'm great. I just want to say nice show. I want to shout out to my three favorite researchers out there, which is the Hitman.
Nice. Hey, Hitman, how you doing?
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, guys, thanks for the shout out. I appreciate that. I just wanted to touch base on something Carmen said earlier. When you really start digging into what authors are writing and you start looking at the primary sources, very often you're going to find they're just listing someone else's sources and they've never looked at the actual documents. Mm-hmm. And that leads to a continued mythology that is really frustrating when you've got people citing other people's books, and when you as a researcher start digging and you find the actual document that people are quoting, and it says nothing even remotely close to what they're using it for. So,
Carmine, would you like to cite an example of this?
Oh, the documents? Sure. I think I might be able to think of one. Yeah, Mark Lane has a document that everyone loves to cite, but no one really looks at the exact document. They just cite his movie or they cite his books. Now, the document does say the word Mauser, as Lane contends. However, if you read the whole document, The only thing that sounds like Mauser is that word Mauser. Everything else goes with the Carcano, and it's from 2 days later before they even knew what street Kennedy was hit on. So they made a mistake, like they made so many other times. Instead, Lane took that and forever has bandied it as there was a Mauser. There wasn't. I also have a document of Roger Craig's original interview with Mark Lane. Guess what they don't mention? A Mauser.
One other document misrepresentation, which is one of my favorites, which is out there and is part of the mythology in the alternative media, is Executive Order number 11110. Now,
Yes.
anybody want to tackle that really quickly?
The Federal Reserve thing.
Yeah. I leave that open to you guys. I've done it enough.
Please, somebody else. I've heard this one so many times.
The whole
I think
JFK
it's
was
just
going to end
important
the Fed.
to-
Well,
Yep.
first of all, let's examine what it is they show for proof, which is the United States note, okay? Which existed long before Kennedy took any sort of office, which existed post-Kennedy, all the way up to 1971 when there was a change in the monetary policy in this country because Nixon finally took us the rest of the way off of the gold standard. Hello? Okay. But read the executive order for a moment. What does it actually do? Anybody know?
Oh no! After I saw the claims, I
You
just
got
sort of
this
dismissed
one.
it.
You got this one, Trish?
No, you
Chris
go ahead.
Wood.
You're doing a great job.
Okay. It's actually an augmentation of a previous executive order. Okay? And it looks like Hitman dropped off the call. You can call back in if you want, man. I have no problem as long as you can, kind of not make a whole lot of noise. You're good. So you can hang out. But here's the thing. It actually is an augmentation of a previous executive order. And what it does in reality is turn over the presidential privilege of deciding how many of these notes are issued to the Secretary of Treasury. That's what it actually does. And once again, unknown caller, I cannot accept you. You will have to unblock your number in order to call in. I'm sorry, that's just the way things work. It's not my rule, it's just the way things work.
Can I make a quick joke?
Sorry, Judith.
Exactly. Thank you.
We think alike.
She has to go back.
Sorry, Richard.
Okay.
Yeah.
So please, first of all, read the document. And you know what? Don't believe me. Don't believe me. If you want to read a similar analysis of this, and this should have been dispelled many, many years ago, if people accept if people accept the authority of somebody like, G. Edward Griffin on the subject of the Federal Reserve, go ahead and enter G. Edward Griffin and the JFK myth into a search engine. Just go ahead and do that. See what you come up with. You'll find that he printed an article in 2001 explaining this away once and for all. Now, maybe you don't believe the whole Jekyll Island thing, but I do. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you understand the way that this guy did his research on that, and you also read the documents, I can't argue with G. Edward Griffin. So go ahead and look at that if you like. Anyway, sorry. Go right ahead, guys. But do read the executive order. It is possible to get a copy of it.
So what's next?
I leave the floor open. We didn't really get too many suggestions from Zach and Trish. I mean, what didn't we cover, guys, that you really want to get to?
One thing I'd like to mention is Dennis Morissette and his work with the Babushka lady. I think that he's uncovered quite a few interesting topics regarding that, and I really do hope at some point you do get him on your show to take a listen to. He's uncovered quite a few different things, including information regarding the camera, which of course Zach had a part of helping him with. And I think that that's a very important topic. And I don't want to step on any toes by any means by bringing him up, but I do hope that at some point you do consider bringing him on.
Yeah, I think that all of us agree that, like we said, the lines need to be redrawn. They shouldn't be pro and anti-conspiracy because that infers a bias. They should be pro and anti-evidence.
And I'll tell you what, if you look back at Richard Sprague's work, and I'm not talking about Richard Sprague, who actually was, removed as the chief counsel for the House Select Committee. I'm not talking about that Richard Sprague. I'm talking about the other one, okay? The guy who did photo analysis. If you take a look back at him trying to track down who the Babushka lady was, that sounds a hell of a lot more plausible than Beverly Oliver. I'm sorry, I told Brett Holland the same thing on this show that, although I agree that he had some very good sources in his book, one of the ones that I would have absolutely advised him against using was Beverly Oliver because I simply don't buy her story. It's that simple, and gee, there's reasons for this, but, I'm wondering if anybody doesn't know, by the way, I always got to rewind this because, I forget. I'm speaking to people that understand all this stuff like I do. And once again, blocked number caller. You think I'm kidding? This is like...
They don't learn. They never learn.
5 or 6 of these now. Blocked numbers cannot be accepted. Okay, if you allow your number on, I can bring you into the show. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
I wonder why they're not letting their number in. It's not like they don't have anything honest to say, do they?
I don't know because I didn't speak to them. Anyway, see, there you go. I had to put you back into the.
I hope that everybody. I'm sorry, Chuck. Please go on. I just wanted to respond real quick.
Well, okay, the Babushka lady, just a quick explanation. There is a woman who is easily seen in the Zapruder film and also the Nix film, the alleged copies that we have now at this point in time, that is wearing a scarf over her head and a coat and all of that, and she's standing in the vicinity of, let's see now, let's think about this, Charles Brem, Mary Mormon, she's on that side of the road, okay, opposite from the grassy knoll, and she seems to be holding something up to her face. And for many, many years now, people have accepted that this is a lady named Beverly Oliver. I have reviewed her accounts of things. I have reviewed the photographic evidence. I simply do not believe her. Now, could I be wrong? It's a possibility. But that is where I stand on the subject. But just so everybody knows, this is who we're talking about, and Beverly Oliver used to make a very big deal out of when she was on the Geraldo show or whatever, which did remind me just now that we did not touch on Madeline Duncan Brown. But anyway, we should do that before
the party
time, because the assassination party is important, isn't it?
Exactly.
Okay. But hang on, just
I
just
think all of us on the call here are like the only people in the world that weren't at this party because at one point or another, everyone seemed to be there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even people who were documented as being in other places.
Yep.
For instance, J. Edgar Hoover.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, too many people saw.
Apparently, the party was for him.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't want to cut anybody off. I was just going to say, too many people saw an executive action and then made that happen in their mind.
Yep.
I mean, it's not that it isn't feasible that a meeting occurred with some people at some point, but once again, Johnson had no... I think they're trying to call again.
No, that's just a little bit of noise coming off of Charles there real quick. I don't know what...
Sorry about that, my phone slipped on me.
Oh, it's okay. But Johnson likely wasn't there. Hoover likely wasn't there because Hoover wasn't dumb enough to go to that meeting. I mean, people don't understand. That's an implication, and then that's where it begins. This has to be a small, compartmentalized operation. This can't have tons of people knowing about it. Otherwise, someone's going to talk.
Right. Nobody's going to have parties where they invite, mistresses and random people to appear and actually see for their own, see with their own eyes the meetings that occur.
Yeah, it lines up with.
Well, you want to know the best part? is it's supposed to be at Clint Murchison's house.
Yeah.
Funny enough, there are documents showing that Clint Murchison sold that house in 1962.
Nice.
So he decided, let's throw a shindig at my old house.
You're exactly
The new
correct,
owners
Charles.
won't mind.
That's great, Charles.
You're exactly correct, Charles. That is one of the major issues with this. Duncan,
Another thing too is it's third party too. In a court of law, they wouldn't accept hearsay. And in the documentary, they have a maid that is discussing what the limo driver had said that apparently drove Hoover to and from the airport, so on and so forth, what another maid told her. In a court of law, that wouldn't be accepted. And I think that's very important to remember as well. If it's not accepted in court, it shouldn't be accepted in the court of public opinion either.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I get into arguments with people all the time telling me this isn't a court. No, but see, a lot of people always talk about how they want to reopen the case. Well, let me tell you a little thing. If you want to reopen the case, you need evidence. You can't just guess.
Right.
Right. And you know what? I didn't even bother. I don't even remember giving out the phone number, by the way. That's the funny part, too. 718-717-8296. 718-717-8296, and you can't block your number.
Which means, I think it's safe to say that we're not paranoid anymore.
No. No, absolutely not. But anyway.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate the help.
Well, you know, listen. You got to have a little bit of fun with this, because after a while, man, it'll make you really crazy.
Yeah, it's laugh or cry, and I like to laugh.
Yeah,
exactly. And you know, and the sad thing is that, you know, again, like I said at the top of the show, we take this seriously for our own reasons, and you know, it's not about solving the great crime mystery for a lot of people. It's not about correcting history for a lot of people. It's not about, you know, it's all sorts of different motives. But here's the thing. If we can all agree to deal with the realities, what exists, what's left of the evidence anyway, okay, and the best documentation we can get our hands on, the best testimony we can get our hands on from firsthand accounts, you know, this might become a whole lot more simple to deal with. And it wouldn't have to be something that requires 1,000 volumes, okay, or better at this point, in the literature of all sorts of mainstream published books, which, of course, we didn't touch on the biggest mythology of all, which is sort of a composite of the O'Reillys, Posners, and thusly all of the other Warren Commissioner defenders that have been out there, you know, starting with David Bellin, of course, moving on well beyond that. Of course, I don't know if you guys ever read David Bellin's book about this.
No.
Okay, well, when you have time and you feel as though you want to lose a few IQ points, go right ahead. It's not as...
I think I lost enough reading Case Closed.
Yeah. How about Judah's book? I want my money back.
I didn't pay for it, so I got an autographed copy given to me for free from somebody who didn't want it anymore.
Well, if we're lucky,
why they didn't want it.
If we're lucky, as the myths fade into obscurity, that'll be a rare collector's item.
Yeah, you know, I'm hoping so. And I told you the story, Carmine, off the air about how I got a hold of my my Bugliosi book, right?
Yeah. It was a good one.
This is a good one. Okay, 2,000 pages. All right? 2,000 pages from Bugliosi, and I won't even get into all the allegations about whether he did his own work or anything else. Nope, I don't need to do that. But let me tell you this. A $50 book is sitting in a bookstore, discounted on top of discounted, and it became $2.58. So I decided it was time to buy the book / CD-ROM. And this was not long after its release, ladies and gentlemen. This this doorstop of a book failed almost right away, despite all of its pre-orders. But anyway, back to it. And they released a smaller version of it, later, the 4 Days of November deal. But I got mine, and I decided to go back to the rack and buy the other 4 that were sitting there. because it was $2.58 with tax, by the way, which is 7% in New Jersey. So I'm not sure exactly the math right this moment, but you can do it in your head. So I walk away with this cumbersome stack of books. I went outside to the nearest dumpster. I tore out CD-ROM and an illustration section of one book, threw 4 of them into the dumpster, and walked away with my one copy, and proceeded to torture myself for the next, at least a month, trying to get through this boring thing. Thank you, Vince Bugliosi. I would really like my $2.58 back any time now, sir. But I would more, since you have such great, analysis about the universe and the nature of God in your later books, I would really like that portion of my life returned to me, if you can, so I can relive it without your book.
With interest.
Well, interest would be nice, but I'm not demanding interest. Anyway. Sorry, guys. I just felt like I needed to say that because I don't know if I ever said that on the air, but I told Carmine that story, and he said, you gotta remember to tell people that.
Yep. It's a lesson. You learned a lesson.
I learned an absolute lesson because the author of Helter Skelter, or the alleged co-author of Helter Skelter and mythology, also provides us with an overwhelming, boring volume of crap in the JFK case. So, something to avoid. Case closed? Yes. If you want to do a little bit of damage to your frontal lobe, fine. Next. Killing Kennedy, killing Jesus, killing Patton, I think now.
Well, yeah, my thing with Posner and O'Reilly, I think, is fairly well known. With O'Reilly, it's another myth maker, and he finally got caught, which is awesome. And I credit the family, I credit Jefferson Morley, I credit everyone that came out against him. People argued with me about why I liked an article where Hugh Ainsworth came out against him because he's pro-commission. I don't care. It's the truth. Either you want the truth or you don't.
See, that's the thing. If the truth is the truth, that's the end of it. And even with a guy like McAdams, who has been extremely, divisive over the years, I'm sorry. When he's right, he's right.
Yeah, we're all right sometimes, and we're all wrong sometimes, and people need to start realizing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so again, 718-717-8296, and blocked caller, I cannot take your call. I am sorry.
I think we have fans.
Is that 7? I think that's 7 attempts now. All right.
You got to give them persistence. A for persistence, E for evidence.
There you go. And we're actually an hour and a half deep here, so man, oh man, I'm now just going to throw it open and shut my mouth as best I can. I'm sorry, guys. I know I talk a lot, and I kind of pushed the subjects along, but I wanted to make sure we covered a lot of ground.
You're great, Chuck. Don't worry about it.
Okay, so if you guys feel as though something was left out, especially, because you and I kind of dictated the topics a lot here, Carmine, I'd love to hear from Zach and Trish about whatever it is that they think we left out.
Okay, well, one of the things that pops into my mind, maybe we touched upon it briefly earlier, is doorman. And, how people tend to think that this is going to be, or did, and some people still do. I mean, we have a whole Oswald is innocent committee that tends to think that this is the piece of evidence that's going to solve this, or did solve it in their minds. But in reality, it's really just nothing more than, as we were talking about before, it's just you're staring at blobs. I mean, Trish and I put out an essay about, our analysis of Judith Baker's doorman pixelation analysis, which in reality was really, and I, don't mean to criticize her particularly, but I guess this is a criticism. It was a really poorly thought out study. It was extremely juvenile almost, I hate to say it. She backed it up with pretty much nothing. And she said this was the most important piece of evidence that she's found to date. And this is just the tip of the iceberg with this movement. And I call it a movement because it is. They've basically taken this extreme, you referred to Elkins, it was that photograph. And they take the blobs of what you can barely make out an image of a face and a body, and they're turning it into Oswald and using it as the touchstone, the Rosetta Stone for the entire case. I can't begin to say how irresponsible that is.
Yeah, no, and she's not alone. Other people do it too. Black Dog Man, Hole Man, Prayer Man, Blah Man. They make up new names. They come up with a myth and they try to sell it.
What is the name for that? I always forget this.
What do you...
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go right ahead.
Now we're all too polite.
I'm trying to handle.
Oh, okay. Well, you have to almost wonder what sort of psychological mechanism comes into play that allows people to do this and then carry this torch until the end of their lives almost. I mean, goodness, you can present evidence that says that, well, I think you're wrong here, and they just don't want to hear it. It almost borders on some sort of, I don't want to say it, mental illness almost.
Actually, religion is what I like to use. It's like religion. They've convinced themselves.
Right.
You're putting faith into it.
You're putting, right, Trish said it, you're putting faith into something. That's really what it is. I myself am a faithful person. I'm a religious man, but I definitely see comparisons in the way that, there is no quote-unquote evidence, hard empirical evidence that God exists. It's faith. But once again, there's no hard empirical evidence that Oswald was doorman, but yet people still just stick to their guns and no matter what.
And even Oswald stated that he wasn't in the doorway. So again, going with, Oswald spoke the truth all the way through his interrogation, and people need to believe him, but they don't believe him on this. He's wrong. He didn't know where he was.
Exactly.
It seems silly to me. It's cherry picking the information that fits the story.
Yep. No consistency.
Absolutely. And, okay, so we got a question from the chat room regarding the Don Adams, from an office building with a high-powered rifle scenario.
What was it? Miltier.
Yeah, the whole Miltier thing. Yeah.
I'll go, or one of you guys can go, whatever you want. I'm sure we all know this one.
and then after that, we have another caller. So.
You want me to go, or you guys?
You go ahead, for it, Carmen.
Okay, Miltier, in my opinion, is a possibility. I think that there are some credible researchers out there looking into the nationalist movement angle. I think that they could have been part of it, but once again, like the mafia, they were not in control. It had to be a rogue agent, or it had to be somebody with the CIA tactics of the Guatemala documents from '54 to set this up properly.
Right. 540 area code, you're on.
Good evening. How are you? It's Schmutzy out of the chat room.
Oh, well, hold on a second. I was trying to get to the 540 caller.
Sorry,
first.
I'm sorry.
Hold on a second, Schmutzy. 540, you're on.
How you doing, Chuck?
All right, how you doing?
Good. This is your boy Rob Clark from the Lone Gunman Podcast.
Nice.
Hello, Rob.
We did a shout out.
Hey, I just wanted to call and tell you all what a great job you're doing, and I am thoroughly enjoying the show, and it is much needed and much overdue.
That's great, man. We're glad to hear from you.
Yes.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you,
Nice to talk to you, Rob.
I'm going to go eat dinner. You all have a great night, and I'll still be listening.
Bon appetit.
You too, Rob.
Thanks,
All right,
Rob.
see
Take
y'all.
care.
Yep.
Peace out, bro.
Yep.
Later,
Rob.
man.
The
Peace.
402 area code, you're on.
Am I on?
Yes, you are.
Hey, guys. I really appreciate this show. This is Fred James, actually.
Wow.
I think I did hear my name. Did I hear my name mentioned?
Yes, you did. You were one of the good ones.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I misinterpreted. I thought there was something that something derogatory or negative, but I
no.
guess
No,
I guess
Fred, just
my manners on the threads are
What?
showing for.
the one. I think it was actually me. I think it was actually me. This is Charles, Fred. I think it was actually me that brought up your name, and what I was just saying was basically that that you seem to be pretty pretty much into the Oswald was the lone shooter opinion, and I just brought up that there's guys like you, and the other guy I brought up was like Steve Rowe, who have these beliefs, but yet you still speak to everybody in a respectful manner and you don't take shots at people just because they have differing opinions of you. And that's
Well, you might
brought your
consider
name
this
up.
kind of funny because the caller that couldn't get in, I heard the suggestion that maybe that could have been Judith Baker, but that was actually Steve Rowe. We're communicating with each other and talking about the show. I mean, you guys are doing a good job. Trish and Zach are some of my most favorite researchers ever. The essays that they've done
Fred.
on Judith Baker, the pixel degeneration the analysis that she did, I mean, it just totally shows. It doesn't give her any credibility whatsoever because it's just one more point. And these points could just add over and over and over again. It just keeps adding up. And if you keep debunking the person in different areas of her, the allegations she's making, how can you be considered by anybody to be credible when you have so many things that just continues to get knocked down? So I don't, it's just one of those things, and I just wanted to show my appreciation for the work they've done on that. And Carmine, the premium that you put on evidence, I mean, it's just like very strong everywhere that you put it, and I really appreciate that. It keeps me on my toes. I mean, you guys have seen me in the threads debating things. I'm kind of nervous, so just
you're doing great, Fred. Don't worry about it.
No, Fred, please take a breath for a second, man. I want to say something. You're a guy who believes Oswald did it?
Yeah, actually, it's a 22-year journey. I actually did think that there was room for conspiracy until a little over a year ago. I made a little bit of a transition. In my opinion, if there was a conspiracy, it would have to involve Oswald as a shooter.
Okay.
And then the conspirators who would have been involved would be unknown at this point. In my opinion, that's the only way.
I think that's wholly reasonable, Fred. I don't think that we can attribute innocence to Oswald utterly. That's a bias. So that's why I think we can get along, is because he's a patsy. That means some sort of connection somewhere. Now, whether he was set up early or whether he was part of the engineering of the plot, I think is the question that remains.
Yes, I think that's possible. But right now, I don't think it's probable. It's a possibility in my mind, but I just don't think that's what happened. But that's not why I called to talk about that. But I just wanted to make one comment, though, about the Bush lady.
Okay.
I actually attended a conference last November, and I saw the shoes Beverly purports to be the shoes she wore on that day. Those are not the shoes of the Babushka lady. The shoes that you can see clearly in the Skaggs and Allen photographs.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the shoes that she says that are those shoes. Those are clearly not the same shoes.
Well, you know what happens, Fred, in the fringe end of this stuff is obviously the photographs and the films of the Babushka lady wearing those other shoes have all been drawn in. This is and believe me, I'm saying this sarcastically. This is not my viewpoint. Okay?
But
this is the nonsense.
You're going to say exactly what you're saying is going to be said.
This is the nonsense that will be generated when you present them with the contradiction. And here it is. And I just want to say really quickly, and I apologize because it is my show, so I want to say this to you. I'm really happy that somebody that thinks Oswald did it called in. I really am. Because I'll tell you what, I would believe that a whole lot faster than I would ever buy a tenth of what's in that Me and Lee book. Okay? I would gladly accept that a whole lot faster than that.
Right.
And in fact, I'll tell you a funny thing too, and I know I've never said this anywhere, but the realistic way that I started this journey was to disprove conspiracy theory. I really felt as though it was very strange what happened, because when I was 9 years old, I thought it was very weird that a guy was killed while in the custody of the police. Okay? That shook me. But then I thought the kooky conspiracy theories are ridiculous. All of them. Problem is...
And we have common ground there.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that needs to be pointed out. That's somewhere we can come together And the funny thing also is, actually, up until about a year ago, it was people like Zachary and Trish and some other friends that I really do consider them friends of mine now. And now Carmine, who I've gotten to know over the past several months. Actually, people who make me look at the case from an evidentiary point of view, that's actually what caused my transition. The only room I leave for conspiracy now is as I previously described. But actually, it's these people who are, who I consider some of the greatest researchers who have shown me that the way to look at this is through the eyes, through the scope of evidence. That's what made me the way I am now. I mean, I'm just giving you a little bit of history about myself. That's not the reason why I called. I just wanted to point out the thing about the Babushka lady. But I did make a transition. I was a conspiracy theorist since the early 90s until last year. But because of this show and shows like it and the research that's going on that I can totally agree with, it makes me want to call in and talk to you guys. It makes me want to chat on the sites because we have common ground. We have a place where where we all agree that there's some ridiculous things floating around out there. And to me, it's disrespectful to the history to have such things out there trying to cause division and trying to distort some things that we can come together and know as fact. Some people are just trying to distort them. And in my opinion, those things need to be pointed out. That's why this show is very important. And people need to look into these things on their own, do their own research, and find out for themselves. I made trips to Dallas. I've talked to Eugene Boone in person. I've done things. I mean, I look at things. I measure things. I go in Dili Plaza and do things on my own so I can find out for myself. Mm-hmm. I don't want to just rely on someone's words or someone's book or someone else's research without checking some of the things out for myself. And that's my transition. That's just a little bit of something I just wanted to put out there.
No, and realistically, that's how I started out. That's exactly how I started out, is let me start to verify, because I happen to be in proximity to somebody who had been there. So I see a name mentioned in a book. I happen to know that they're in a particular city, and I would just pick up a phone book. I know that's an old reference at this point, but there used to be phone books in every city.
Rockford Files.
Yes, sir. And
I remember those days, yes.
And I would pick them up, and I would say, gee, I heard that a couple of the guys that used to work at Bethesda are now in Pittsburgh. Guess what? Let me look them up. And a lot of times their phone numbers were listed, and I've said this on the air before. Some people would just hang up on me because who gives a crap? I was a kid, whatever. But some of them would talk to me and tell me, well, that's not exactly what happened, or, you got to understand this or that. And thus the journey began, actually comparing what people are saying witnesses said as opposed to what they have to say. Big difference in a lot of cases.
And I see Fred's call, too, as important because it's showing that both sides can agree on some things. And I think that the most research development and the most progressive research was done when both sides were able to work together at times instead of always being at each other's throats because they disagree.
Oh, right.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah. And you got to realize, too, that you're not going to agree on everything. It's just not going to happen. That's the nature of human nature. I mean, that's
a good thing. That's a good thing.
Some people are Yankee fans, some people are Red Sox fans. That doesn't mean that you can't, still get along and have constructive discussions just because you're not, if you don't disagree with me, I don't want to talk to you. That's not the way to go about things. It's not productive, and all it does is create bad feelings.
I can give ample examples of that with debates I've had with Trish, with Carmine, and with Zachary, where we didn't agree. But we always can come together and find something where we do agree.
Yep.
Right. And the thing that we all want, for sure, we want accurate history. We don't want people making up things about this tragic event that affected the world. From the point that it happened, it affected not just the United States, it affected the whole world. And we take it serious. We don't want distortions being made. We want to find the truth. We're all looking for the truth. And there's truths on both sides. It's
I
where
think
we can come together and find them.
Yep.
One of the better examples of
I
that,
think
to
a
be
big
honest
part
with
of
you.
it too is.
Sorry, Trish. One of the better examples
Sorry, I was going to say a big part of.
of that. Go ahead, Trish.
I was going to say that was part of the big downfall with the Garrison investigation was he didn't have the resources or the manpower. And if you think about it, the most powerful world leader was assassinated. This is a world stage thing. And if there's so many people throughout the world that are investigating this on their private time, they're not getting paid to do it, et cetera, et cetera. And if, everybody's heard different legends, different stories, they have access to different information depending on where they are. And if we could bring that all together and harness that and work together, I think that we could move mountains together.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, and I was going to say that one of the best examples of that, to be honest with you, and this is often forgotten, is the universal agreement between people that absolutely believe that Oswald is the guilty party and the only guilty party, and those of us on the other side of that issue, okay, who came together after the Oliver Stone thing happened, okay, and the ARRB happened. Now, I know it's a big old document dump, and it's a hell of a daunting thing, and I can't even say that I've been through all of it myself, but wow.
Yeah.
That was one point at which we all came together and said, listen, if this is the truth that he did this, then there's no reason to keep withholding all of this stuff.
Right.
Let us have the files.
Right.
Let you prove
Right.
that Oswald did it. You know what? If that's the way it comes out, if there is absolute proof in government hands that shows without any question, or not without any question, but just to a reasonable certainty that that's the answer,
Well,
I might accept it if I can verify it.
Yeah, there was a good point. I think it was Walt Brown, researcher there, Walt Brown, who came out and he said, if it's such cut and dry case, and Oswald's the one that did it, why is there even one piece of paper being withheld from people?
If I could chime in real quick, the Castro plots, among others. There were lots of illegal operations woven into the assassination and peripheral to it that they don't want us to know about. But the bottom line is it's going to come out. So holding off on it just makes you look worse.
Right.
Right. And all of the other
This is my position on the AARB and any information that may potentially come out. I want the truth. I can be influenced back to the other direction if I figure that the evidence has gone that way.
Yeah.
If there's a conspiracy, I mean, if it's clear and plain to me, I'll go back to the other way. I'm the way I am now because of the way I see it. So if there's, I don't have any biases. I do have biases, and I do have emotion about the whole thing. I'm more emotional about the truth now than anything else.
Because after a while, that's exactly where it goes, Fred, is that, you don't any longer care about being married to a theory, okay? You actually want to know what happened. That's it. That's all you want. So let's get
when I started to find things out, like, I never believed Oswald was Doorway Man, but there were some other things that I did believe. Oh, here's an example. The parade route being changed at the last minute, which I do not believe happened. When I found out that was not true, I mean, I because I was such a follower of Jim Garrison and other things similar to that. When I found out that those things weren't true, it made me really angry and emotional. So finding those things out, I did not. I wanted so bad to believe Oswald was completely innocent and was set up.
I understand completely, and Garrison did very well with what he had, but he didn't have that much. That's what the problem was. Amazing that he got some of the things that he did, but still, it's not a complete, we can't deify the guy. It doesn't work that way. Listen, we've got less than 5 minutes left, and Schmutzy from the chat room added back in, so I'm wondering, Schmutzy, what you got to say, because somehow, I don't know, I lost you before.
Yeah, no, you must have dropped me, but that's neither here nor there. The reason, what I wanted to just throw out there is I remember years ago I heard of a guy named Don Adams. He was supposedly an FBI man, and I think he wrote a book, I guess, with his take. I just wanted to throw it out to the panel and ask them what they thought about that particular account.
There's also a well-known YouTube video with that guy on it as well.
I threw a link to his, I think, books to his website into the chat for anybody who's interested. They could just scroll up, but
Yeah,
Anyone?
Well, I'll be honest. I haven't seen that, so I will definitely review it. So thank you very much for adding that, Schmutzy. I do
sure.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Chuck, you were telling me a little bit about him.
well, all right. Well, the Don Adams thing is largely based, again, on the Miltier story.
Okay.
And the problem with that is that it doesn't really go anywhere, unfortunately. And there's a lot of things that FBI agents, retired FBI agents, have come out and said, and it's really all over the map. Don Adams, in some ways, revisits a lot of very old sort of ideas about the assassination, because this guy who was literally involved in fundraising for extreme causes, especially racial causes, literally taking money from people at certain points to promote the idea of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, to try and collect money for those that would want to support his assassination. This guy's literally guilty of that kind of stuff. And Adams had a little bit of direct knowledge about this particular individual. Now, as per his involvement in the Kennedy assassination, I think it's a little far-fetched because they've sort of tied it to another one of these very blurry images in Dealey Plaza. It is, however, remarkable that it seems as though he had some advanced knowledge, but then again, this type of advanced knowledge was in a lot of different cities. This is, again, another reason why I don't buy the whole it's a Dallas plot and it's the oil men and all this other stuff. I don't think that Miltier was a player, personally, but he's definitely a figure worth researching because the guy was involved in all sorts of chicanery regarding racial politics and support of that kind of stuff at that time.
Very much agree.
Yeah, no, I think that Miltier largely was a mid-level leader in the racist movement.
John Birch Society, isn't it?
John Birch Society.
Yeah, Birch.
Yeah, he was a mid-level leader.
Yeah.
And he was. I'm not saying that it isn't possible that he could have heard wind of something somewhere, but he had no direct knowledge in my view. And I also think that it was more of a response to Hoover utilizing illegal methods to destroy the Klan.
You got it.
That he would want to kill JFK, not any of the reasons people try to attribute.
Right.
And look, it's just a timing issue. Yeah, absolutely. It isn't, and it's an interesting subject worthy of study all on its own. Okay. Had Stu Wexler on, and we discussed this, regarding the MLK assassination and the different plots that arose, and Miltier is tied to that.
Whenever you want to do MLK or RFK, you let me know.
Anytime. I think we're going to have to revisit this subject, though, because, guys, we're just about out of time. I want to thank, first of all, Carmine Savastano, who is, a recurring guest here now, and also first-time guests Trish Fleming and Zachary Jandro, right? Jandro. See, I knew it screwed.
Gendro, close enough.
Jandro. See,
that's okay.
It's okay. You should hear what people do to my name. It's amazing. It looks pretty simple to me, but anyway. So I want to thank everybody who decided to tune in, and of course, all the people that are going to catch this later on down the line on YouTube, or if you've downloaded it, shared it with your friends or whatever else. The Ochelli Effect is just about done, and you can find the archives at ucy.tv/TOE. Archives are there. Links to the YouTube playlist are there. Plus, I will post this show on the Blind JFK Researcher channel on YouTube for the... I don't know how many subscribers are over there now, but I'm not very active, except I do post these shows because I think they're valuable, and I think that we did some serious damage to the mythology tonight. Although there is more to go.
Oh, yeah.
So, Schmutzy, man, thanks for calling in, and a big thank you to Fred.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you guys. Thanks for taking my call. And thanks for putting up with my nervousness as well.
Not a problem, brother.
And I'd like
really, the truth is the important thing. Thank you, Charles, also for calling in. Go ahead.
Thanks for having me on, Chuck.
Absolutely, man. And you know what? Maybe we'll have to. Well, I don't know when we're going to plan it, but we're going to have to do this again, I think.
Yeah.
Well, let me know. I'll be out.